My 10-year-old granddaughter Emma looked me straight in the eye at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "Grandma, you're useless. You don't even have a real job." The entire table erupted in laughter. My daughter Sarah, my son-in-law Michael, even my younger grandson Jake joined in. I set down my fork, stood up quietly, and walked out of that house, knowing I would never be their safety net again. That night, Michael texted me, "Hey, the business loan payment is due Monday. Need the $5,000 by noon." I replied with 2 words, "Figure it out." By Tuesday morning, their entire world had collapsed. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me tell you how one grandmother's silence became a family's wake-up call. I'm Eleanor Mitchell, 64 years old, recently retired accountant, and according to my own granddaughter, completely useless. For the past 4 years, since my husband Robert died, I thought my purpose was supporting my daughter Sarah's family through their financial struggles. Turns out, I was just their personal bank account with grandmother attached. Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be special that year. Sarah had insisted on hosting at her McMansion in the suburbs, the one with the chef's kitchen and 3-car garage that somehow always needed my financial assistance to maintain. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, carrying my famous pecan pie and sweet potato casserole, wearing the emerald dress Robert had loved. The house was chaos when I walked in. Emma was glued to her phone. Jake was playing video games at full volume, and Sarah was frantically preparing a meal that looked like it came from a catering company rather than her own efforts. "Mom, finally," Sarah said, barely looking up. "Can you set the table? The good china is in the dining room. No hello, no hug, just immediate deployment into service." But that was normal now. I'd become so accustomed to being useful rather than valued that I barely noticed the difference anymore. Michael arrived home from his urgent business meeting around 3 p.m., which I suspected was actually a golf game based on his flushed face and relaxed demeanor. His tech startup had been about to break through for 3 years now, constantly requiring capital injections that somehow always came from my retirement savings. "Eleanor, good to see you," he said, giving me one of those corporate handshakes that substituted for genuine warmth. "We need to chat later about QA projections." QA projections. Not, "How are you, Mom?" Not, "Thanks for coming," just a coded reminder that he'd be asking for money soon. Dinner began at 4 p.m. with all the traditional chaos of family gatherings. Sarah's sister Jennifer called via video chat from California, making everyone feel inadequate with stories of her Silicon Valley success. My brother Tom set regrets because his new wife wanted to spend Thanksgiving with her family. It was just us, me, Sarah, Michael, and the kids. The trouble started during the main course when Michael began complaining about his startup's cash flow problems. Again. For the 3rd time that month. "The investors are being difficult," he said, sawing into his turkey with unnecessary aggression. "They want to see more traction before releasing the next funding round. It's completely unreasonable. How much do you need?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop myself. 4 years of conditioning had trained me to be the solution to every problem. Michael's eyes lit up. "Well, if we could bridge the gap with about $15, we could." "Mom," Sarah interrupted, shooting Michael a warning look. "We're not discussing business at Thanksgiving, but the damage was done." Emma had been listening while pretending to scroll through her phone. "Why do you always have to give them money, Grandma?" Emma asked, her voice carrying that particular tone of adolescent disdain. "Don't you have anything better to do?" The table went quiet. Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Michael suddenly became very interested in his wineglass. "Grandma, that's rude," Sarah said, but her tone was more amused than corrective. "I'm just saying," Emma continued, emboldened by her mother's weak response. "Grandma doesn't even have a real job anymore. She's retired." Not a polite chuckle or uncomfortable throat clearing, but actual genuine laughter, as if his 10-year-old daughter had just delivered the world's funniest observation. Sarah smiled into her napkin. Jake giggled from across the table. My entire family thought my granddaughter calling me useless was hilarious. I looked around that table at the people I'd sacrificed for. The daughter whose college loans I'd co-signed. The son-in-law whose business failures I'd funded for 3 years. The grandchildren whose private school tuition I'd been quietly paying because public schools weren't good enough for the Mitchell family image. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands, "if I'm useless, then I suppose my usefulness in funding your lifestyle is also at an end." The laughter stopped abruptly. "Mom, she didn't mean it that way," Sarah started, but I was already standing, folding my napkin with deliberate care. "Didn't she?" Because it sounded quite clear to me. And the fact that you all found it amusing suggests she was simply saying what you've all been thinking. "Eleanor, don't be dramatic," Michael said, his tone dismissive. Kids say stupid things. Sit down and finish your dinner. That condescending tone. That assumption that I would simply comply and continue being the family apemer. That was the moment something inside me fractured cleanly and permanently. I think not, I said. Thank you for the lovely Thanksgiving dinner. I'll see myself out. I walked to the front door, retrieved my coat from the closet, and left my daughter's house with as much dignity as I could muster. Behind me, I could hear confused murmuring, but nobody followed me to apologize or ask me to stay. The drive home gave me 40 minutes to think about the past 4 years. After Robert died, I'd been consumed by grief and loneliness. When Sarah first asked for help with Emma's preschool tuition, I'd been grateful to feel needed. That small request had snowballed into a monthly commitment of thousands of dollars for everything from mortgage supplements to business investments to vacation funds. I'd reviewed my bank statements 3 months ago and discovered I'd given Sarah and Michael over $240,000 since Robert's death. $250,000 that had bought me nothing but contempt disguised as tolerance. That night, I made coffee, fed my cat Whiskers, and sat down with my financial records. Every transaction, every transfer, every time I'd bailed them out was documented in meticulous detail. The accountant in me had kept perfect records even while my heart was being exploited. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Michael's text was brief and telling, "Hey, the business loan payment is due Monday. Need the $5,000 by noon. Can you transfer it tomorrow?" Not, "I'm sorry about dinner." Not Emma was out of line, just a demand for money, as if nothing had happened. I stared at that text for a long time, thinking about Robert and what he would say about this situation. Robert, who'd taught me to be generous but never a fool. Robert, who'd built our retirement savings through decades of careful planning. Robert, who would be horrified to know his life's work was being frittered away on a son-in-law's failed business ventures. My response was short: figure it out. I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. Sometimes the most powerful word in the English language is simply no. Friday morning brought 23 missed calls and 47 text messages. I made my coffee, fed Whiskers, and read every panicked message while enjoying my homemade blueberry scones. Amazing how quickly an emergency develops when the money stops flowing. Please call back, Sarah. 6:47 m. This is ridiculous. Michael, 7:15 m. We need to talk about this like adults, Sarah. 7:23 m. The payment is due Monday. Michael, 8:02 m. I sipped my coffee and didn't respond to a single message. Instead, I called my attorney, Patricia Chen, and scheduled an appointment for Monday morning. "Patricia, I need to discuss protecting my assets from family members who feel entitled to my money." "Eleanor, are we talking about Sarah again?" Patricia had been my friend for 20 years and my attorney for 10. She'd warned me about the financial assistance becoming unsustainable, but I hadn't listened. "Yes. Things have escalated. I'm cutting off all financial support, and I expect pushback." "Good. You should have done this years ago. Come Monday at 9 a.m. and we'll discuss your options." At 10:15 a.m., my doorbell rang insistently. Through the window, I saw Sarah's Mercedes in my driveway, parked at an aggressive angle that suggested panic. I opened the door to find my daughter looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was uncombed, her makeup smudged, and she was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt completely unlike her usual polished appearance. What is going on? "Good morning, Sarah. Would you like some coffee?" "I don't want coffee. I want to know why you're not responding to our messages." I stepped aside to let her in, then closed the door and walked calmly to my kitchen. Sarah followed, her agitation filling my peaceful space with negative energy. "Mom, Michael's business payment is due Monday. You know we're counting on that money. Are you?" I poured myself another cup of coffee, deliberately taking my time. "How unfortunate." "What does that mean?" "It means I won't be making that payment, or any future payments. My usefulness, as Emma so cleverly observed, has come to an end." Sarah's face flushed red. She's 10 years old. She didn't understand what she was saying, didn't she? Because 10 is certainly old enough to understand that insulting people has consequences. It's also old enough to have learned that behavior from somewhere. I took a sip of coffee. Tell me, Sarah, where do you think Emma learned that her grandmother is useless?" "Mom, you're being unreasonable." "Am I? Let's be reasonable then." I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd prepared. "In the past 4 years, I've given you and Michael 2043-75 HMD time. That breaks down to mortgage supplements, business investments, private school tuition, car payments, vacation funds, emergency home repairs, and miscellaneous expenses that I no longer even remember." Sarah's face went pale as she stared at the numbers. At the number, $250,000, Sarah. Your father worked his entire life building our retirement savings so we could be comfortable. I've spent nearly half of it supporting a lifestyle you and Michael cannot actually afford. We're going through a rough patch for 4 years. Michael's startup has been about to break through since 2019. How long does a rough patch last before it becomes your actual reality? We have investors lined up, then let the investors fund his business. I'm retired, but the payment on Monday is not my problem. I close my laptop with decisive finality. I suggest you and Michael figure out how to handle your own financial obligations like the adults you claim to be. Sarah stood there opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water. I could see her mind racing, trying different angles of manipulation that might work. Or, Mom, we could lose the house. Then perhaps you should have chosen a more modest house. Or Michael should have taken a stable job instead of playing entrepreneur with my money. That's not fair. You said you believed in Michael's vision. I believed in supporting my daughter through a difficult time. I didn't realize I was funding a lifestyle of delusion and entitlement. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, real ones, I thought, though with Sarah it was always hard to tell. How can you be so cruel? Dad would be ashamed of you. The manipulation tactic was so transparent it was almost funny. Your father would be ashamed that I let you take advantage of me for 4 years. He would be horrified that his granddaughter learned to treat me with contempt while living off my generosity. Fine. Sarah's tears turned to anger instantly. If that's how you feel, maybe you shouldn't see the kids anymore. Maybe we all need some space from your judgment. The threat was designed to hurt me, to make me backtrack and apologize. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of relief. That's probably wise. Some distance will do us all good. Sarah stared at me in shock. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to have the power here, the leverage of my grandchildren's love. Instead, I'd just agreed to the very consequence she'd threatened. Remain that? I absolutely do. Thank you for stopping by, Sarah. Please see yourself out. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and closed the door, listening as Sarah sputtered in disbelief in my kitchen. Eventually, I heard the front door slam and her car peel out of my driveway. Only then did I let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. I'd essentially estranged myself from my only daughter and my grandchildren in the space of one conversation. The old Eleanor would have been devastated, but the new Eleanor, the one who'd finally woken up to being exploited, felt something unexpected. Freedom. The weekend brought radio silence, which I knew was strategic. Sarah and Michael were regrouping, planning their next approach. Our Monday's loan payment deadline was looming, and they needed to figure out how to bridge the $5,000 gap without me. I spent Saturday in my garden, pruning roses and planning the spring planting. Robert had always said gardening was therapeutic, and he'd been right. There was something deeply satisfying about cutting away dead growth to make room for new life. Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. I'd stopped attending after Robert died because I couldn't bear the pitying looks and constant questions about how I was managing. But today, I sat in our old pew and felt Robert's presence in a way I hadn't since his funeral. After service, my friend Margaret found me in the parking lot. Eleanor, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you? I'm actually doing quite well, Margaret. She studied my face with the perceptiveness that had made her such an excellent executive assistant. You look different, lighter somehow. I've made some difficult decisions about family boundaries. It's been liberating. We talked for 20 minutes, and I found myself telling her the whole story. Margaret listened without judgment, nodding occasionally with an expression that suggested she'd seen similar dynamics before. Good for you, she finally said. Robert used to worry that Sarah would take advantage of your generosity after he was gone. He made me promise to check on you regularly. He did? Oh yes, he loved Sarah dearly, but he wasn't blind to her tendencies. He saw how she'd manipulated him over the years into funding her extravagant wedding, her first house, her car. He drew the line eventually, but he worried you wouldn't. The revelation that Robert had seen Sarah's character clearly was both validating and heartbreaking. Why didn't he say something? He did, Eleanor, many times. But you didn't want to hear it. You believed Sarah would grow up and become more responsible. Robert hoped you were right but feared you were wrong. Monday morning, I arrived at Patricia's office at 8:05 a.m., 5 minutes early as always. Her assistant brought me coffee while I waited in the elegant lobby of Chen and Associates. Eleanor, come in, Patricia said, welcoming me into her corner office with views of downtown. Let's talk about protecting your assets. For the next 2 hours, we discussed trusts, estate planning, and legal structures that would prevent Sarah from accessing my money even if something happened to me. Patricia also drafted a formal letter to Sarah and Michael stating that all financial assistance had ended permanently and that any future requests would be declined. This feels so formal, I said, reviewing the letter. Is it necessary? Absolutely. You need a paper trail showing that you've clearly communicated your boundaries. When they push back, and they will, this document proves you were explicit about ending financial support. Do you think they'll try legal action? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Leaned back, considering. Possibly. Entitled people often resort to courts when manipulation fails. Has Michael ever had you sign any business documents? My stomach dropped. Yes. Several. He said he needed me as a co-investor for credibility with his board. Do you have copies? No, he always said they were standard LSE paperwork. Patricia's expression turned serious. Eleanor, you need to get copies of everything you've signed. If Michael structured his business with you as a liable partner rather than a simple investor, you could be responsible for his debts. Our meeting ended with a checklist of immediate actions. Obtain all business documents I'd signed, change all my passwords and PINs, review my credit report for any accounts opened in my name, and move the majority of my liquid assets into a protected trust that Sarah couldn't claim even as my heir. I left Patricia's office feeling both empowered and anxious. I'd taken the first steps toward protecting myself, but the full scope of my vulnerability was becoming clear. At 2:33 p.m. my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Mitchell? This is David Torres from First National Bank. I'm calling about a loan payment that's now overdue. I'm sorry, Mr. Torres, but I don't have any loans with First National. According to our records, you're a co-signer on a business line of credit for Mitchell Tech Solutions. The payment was due today, and we haven't received it. My heart sank. How much is the payment? $5,000, plus a $200 late fee since it wasn't received by noon, Mr. Torres. I need to see all documentation related to this loan. I believe I may have been misled about what I was signing. There was a pause. Are you saying you didn't knowingly co-sign this loan? I'm saying I need to review the documents before making any payments. Please send everything to my attorney. I gave him Patricia's contact information and ended the call. Within an hour, Patricia called back, her voice tight with controlled anger. Eleanor, I just received the loan documents from First National. You're not just a co-signer. Michael structured this as a personal loan with you as the primary borrower. He's the secondary borrower. What does that mean? It means the bank will come after you first for any missed payments. Michael protected himself by making you the primary liable party. The betrayal was staggering. My son-in-law hadn't just asked me to co-sign a loan, he'd structured it so I would take the financial hit if his business failed. How much do I owe? The line of credit is for $150,000. They've drawn down $20,000 so far. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. Patricia, I didn't know. I thought I was just signing partnership papers. I believe you, but legally you're responsible. We need to figure out how to handle this. Eleanor, what the hell is going on? The bank called saying you're refusing to make the payment? Michael, did you structure that loan with me as the primary borrower? Silence. From Michael? It's standard business practice to have the person with better credit as the primary. Your credit score is 790. Mine is lower. You lied to me. You told me it was partnership paperwork. I didn't lie. You are a partner. That's what partners do. They share liability. The gaslighting was breathtaking. From Michael, I'm going to say this clearly. I will not be making any more payments on that loan or any other financial obligations related to your business. You're on your own. You can't do that. You're the primary borrower. The bank will come after you. Then I guess we'll both learn an expensive lesson about honesty and responsibility. I hung up on my son-in-law for the first time in our 12-year relationship, and it felt absolutely right. Tuesday brought escalation. Sarah arrived at my door at 7 a.m., banging loudly enough to wake the neighborhood. Open this door right now. I took my time making coffee before answering. When I finally opened the door, Sarah pushed past me into my living room, waving her phone like a weapon. Do you know what you've done? Michael's business is being shut down. The bank is calling in the loan. We're going to lose everything. Good morning to you too, Sarah. Would you like coffee? I don't want coffee. I want you to fix this. There's nothing to fix. Michael structured a loan to protect himself at my expense. I'm simply declining to continue enabling that arrangement. Enabling? You're not enabling anything. You're destroying our lives. I sat down in Robert's old armchair, the one I'd been avoiding since his death because it hurt too much. Today, it felt right. Powerful, even. Sarah, let me ask you something. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for money, not to request babysitting, just to check on your mother? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. I don't know. We talk all the time. We transact all the time. We don't talk. When's the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my feelings? This is ridiculous. It's been 4 years, Sarah. 4 years since your father died, and you haven't once asked me how I'm coping with being a widow. You haven't asked if I'm lonely or scared or struggling. You've only asked how much money I can give you. That's not fair. We've been dealing with our own problems for 4 years. Problems that somehow always require my money to solve? I shook my head. I've enabled you to avoid responsibility for your own lives. That ends now. Fine. You want to be selfish? Go ahead, but don't expect us to be around when you're old and need help. The threat was supposed to devastate me. Instead, it crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. Sarah, if the only reason you'd help me in old age is because I gave you money when you were younger, then I don't want that kind of help. Love and care shouldn't be transactional. You're unbelievable, Sarah stormed toward the door, then turned back with tears streaming down her face. Emma asks about you every day. Jake made you a card at school. They don't understand why Grandma won't talk to them. The guilt attempt was sophisticated, I had to admit. Use the grandchildren's feelings to manipulate me back into compliance. Use turt. Sarah, I haven't blocked anyone. You're the one who suggested we needed distance. My phone works perfectly fine if the children want to call me. On your terms, right? Everything has to be your way now? No, on terms of mutual respect, which means not calling me useless at family dinners and laughing about it. Sarah left without another word, and I spent the rest of the morning working in my garden, trying to process the emotional whiplash of standing my ground while my relationship with my daughter disintegrated. Wednesday brought a new player into the conflict, my brother Tom. Eleanor, what's this I hear about you cutting off Sarah completely? Hello, Tom. I see Sarah's been working the family tree trying to find allies. She's worried about you, says you're not acting like yourself. I'm acting exactly like myself, for the first time in 4 years actually, Tom sighed the way he always did when he thought I was being difficult. Ellie, Sarah made a mistake. Emma's a kid. Kids say stupid things. Is this really worth destroying your relationship with your daughter? Tom, did Sarah tell you she and Michael have taken $43,000 from me over 4 years? Silence. Did she mention that Michael structured business loans with me as the primary borrower without my knowledge? Or that when I declined to continue funding their lifestyle, Sarah threatened to keep my grandchildren from me? She said, you were having some kind of breakdown that you were making. Irrational financial decisions, I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised me. Of course she did, because clearly, cutting off unlimited funds to ungrateful family members is irrational. Maybe you both need some time to cool down. I can mediate if you want. Tom, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't a misunderstanding that needs mediation. This is me finally setting boundaries that should have existed all along. After Tom hung up, I realized Sarah's strategy, paint me as mentally unstable so family members would pressure me to see reason and resume financial support. It was actually quite clever. Thursday, my financial advisor called with concerning news. Eleanor, someone tried to access your investment accounts this morning. The attempt was blocked because they didn't have the correct security answers, but I thought you should know. Can you tell who tried to access them? The login attempt came from an IP address registered to a Michael Brennan. In your city? My son-in-law had tried to hack into my investment accounts. The violation was so profound I couldn't immediately process it. Eleanor, are you still there? Yes, I need to change all my security protocols immediately. We spent an hour updating passwords, security questions, and adding additional layers of protection to my accounts. But the damage was done. I now knew exactly how far Michael would go to access my money. Friday afternoon, I received a certified letter from an attorney I'd never heard of, Morrison & Associates. Inside was a formal legal notice. Demand for payment of business obligations, dear Mrs. Mitchell. We represent Mitchell Tech Solutions in the matter of outstanding loan obligations with First National Bank. As the primary borrower on a $150,000 business line of credit, you are legally obligated to bring the account current. Within 30 days or face collections proceedings, I called Patricia immediately. They're threatening to sue me. Expected. Don't worry, we'll respond with our own notice that you were misled about the loan structure and are pursuing fraud claims. That should slow them down. Patricia, how did my life become this complicated? You married well, worked hard, and saved wisely. Then you had a child who learned to see you as a resource instead of a person. It's unfortunately common, Eleanor. That weekend, I made a decision. I couldn't control Sarah and Michael's actions, but I could control my response. I would fight back not with emotion or manipulation, but with the same weapon they'd used against me, the legal system. Monday morning, I filed a formal complaint with the police for fraud regarding the business loan. I also filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office about predatory lending practices at First National Bank for allowing Michael to structure a loan that misrepresented the nature of my financial obligation. Finally, I called a private investigator. I need you to conduct a thorough investigation of my son-in-law's business. I suspect fraud and I need documentation. The investigator, a retired FBI agent named Marcus Webb, came to my house that afternoon with a contract and a recorder. Tell me everything, Mrs. Mitchell. Start from the beginning. I talked for 3 hours, providing dates, amounts, documents, and every detail I could remember about Michael's business dealings. Marcus listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. Mrs. Mitchell, based on what you're describing, I think we're looking at much more than simple financial manipulation. If your son-in-law structured loans fraudulently and potentially used your money for purposes other than what he claimed, we might be looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and possibly securities fraud if he misrepresented his company to investors. How long will the investigation take? Give me 2 weeks for the initial findings. I'll need access to any documents you have, bank statements, emails, texts, anything related to money transfers or business discussions. I spent that evening organizing 4 years of financial records, email correspondence, and text messages. Every request for money, every promise about Michael's business breakthroughs, every manipulation tactic was documented in painful detail. Looking at it all laid out chronologically, I couldn't believe I'd fallen for the same patterns repeatedly. But grief makes people vulnerable, and Sarah and Michael had exploited that vulnerability with surgical precision. As I organized the final folder, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Grandma, it's Emma. I'm sorry about what I said. Please don't be mad at us forever." My heart clenched. Whatever was happening between me and Sarah, the children were innocent victims of their parents' choices. I texted back, "Emma, I love you very much. I'm not mad at you. But Grandma needs some time to work through some grown-up problems with your mom and dad. I promise we'll see each other again when things are better. When will that be? I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise I haven't forgotten. About you or Jake." As I put down my phone, I realized that this was perhaps the cruelest consequence of Sarah and Michael's actions. Their children's relationship with their grandmother had become collateral damage in a financial war, but I couldn't let guilt manipulate me back into being exploited. Emma and Jake needed to learn that actions have consequences, even if those lessons came with temporary pain. The old Eleanor would have immediately called Sarah and apologized to restore access to her grandchildren. The new Eleanor understood that sometimes protecting yourself means accepting painful losses, at least temporarily. Marcus Webb worked fast. Within a week, he'd uncovered the first layer of Michael's deceptions. "Mrs. Mitchell, your son-in-law doesn't own Mitchell Tech Solutions. He's an employee." I stared at the documents. Marcus spread across my dining room table. Corporate filings showed that Mitchell Tech Solutions LC was owned by 3 individuals, Richard Morrison, David Chen, and Margaret Foster. But Michael Brennan was listed as Chief Operations Officer, an employee, not an owner. But he told me he founded the company, that he needed investment capital to grow his startup. He lied. The company was founded in 2015 by Morrison and Chen. Michael was hired in 2018. According to these corporate records, he has no ownership stake whatsoever. Then, where did my money go? Pulled out bank statements that made my stomach turn. He opened a separate business account using a similar name, Mitchell Technology Solutions, Inc. Note the different punctuation. That's the account where your money was deposited. What did he use it for? That's where it gets interesting. Marcus showed me a pattern of withdrawals, large cash amounts, transfers to personal accounts, payments to luxury retailers, and substantial gambling expenses at local casinos. He gambled my money? A significant portion, yes, about $80,000 over 3 years at 3 different casinos. The rest went to lifestyle expenses, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury car leases. Your money didn't fund a business, Mrs. Mitchell. It funded Michael's gambling addiction and desire to appear successful. I felt physically ill. Every time Sarah had told me they were struggling, every time Michael had explained his business needed cash flow assistance, they'd been lying. My retirement savings had been financing gambling trips and shopping sprees. Is there more? Unfortunately, yes. Marcus pulled out another file. Where Michael has been running the same scheme with 3 other people. 2 of Sarah's aunts and your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. They've all been giving him money for his business over the past 2 years. Mrs. Patterson, Helen Patterson, who lives 2 doors down, the same. She gave him $35,000 last year after her husband died. Michael told her he'd help invest her life insurance payout in his promising tech startup. The scale of the deception was staggering. This wasn't just familial financial manipulation, it was systematic fraud targeting vulnerable people. What do we do now? Now we take this to law enforcement. I have a contact at the FI's Financial Crimes Unit. With your permission, I'd like to make an introduction. 2 days later, I sat in a conference room at the FI field office, telling my story to Special Agent Jennifer Walsh and her team. They listened with the practiced, neutral expressions of people who'd heard similar stories too many times. Mrs. Mitchell, what your son-in-law did constitutes wire fraud, bank fraud, and potentially mail fraud if he used postal services for any of these schemes, Agent Walsh explained. The fact that he targeted multiple victims shows a pattern of predatory behavior. Will this lead to criminal charges? If we can build a solid case, yes, but I need to be honest with you. These cases are difficult to prosecute when there's a family relationship involved, defense attorneys claim. It was a gift, a loan between family members, a misunderstanding. Juries are reluctant to send someone to prison for taking money from their own mother-in-law, even when it's fraud, even then. However, the fact that he targeted multiple victims and created a fake business entity strengthens our case significantly. I'm going to need you to cooperate fully with our investigation. Whatever you need over the next 3 weeks. I provided the FI with every document, email, text message, and bank record related to Michael's schemes. They interviewed me multiple times, building a timeline of deception that stretched back 5 years, even before Robert died. The investigation revealed that Michael had begun grooming me as a financial target during Robert's cancer treatment. The sympathetic visits, the offers to help with household repairs, the constant presence during our family's most vulnerable period, all of it had been strategic positioning for future exploitation. He waited until your husband died to